My name is Sarah, and I was once a little girl who believed my world would never break. I remember my childhood not by dates or years, but by the warmth of my father's voice, the scent of cinnamon tea he used to brew on rainy evenings, and the way he held my hand so tightly every time we crossed the road, like he was holding on to the whole world. My mother died when I was only a baby. I never truly knew her, but my father made sure I never felt her absence. He filled my life with so much love and laughter that I never questioned why other children had mothers and I didn't. He was both parents in one body, gentle and strong, soft but protective. He used to say I was his little moon, the light that kept him going. We lived in a small but cozy house in the countryside. There was a garden out back where I used to chase butterflies and plant daisies with my father. Life was peaceful, slow, and filled with ordinary magic. Until one day everything changed. It was a Sunday morning. My father had gone to the city for work and was supposed to return by evening. I sat by the window all day waiting, my small fingers pressed against the glass as the sky darkened and the rain began to fall. He never came back. That night, a policeman knocked on our door. I still remember the sound of my grandma's gasp, her hands flying to her mouth, and the way her knees buckled. I didn't understand then, but later I learned, my father had died in a car crash. He was hit by a drunk driver. I was only 7. The day we buried him, it felt like the world stopped spinning. The rain didn't stop for 3 whole days. I thought maybe the sky was mourning too. After the funeral, my grandmother tried to comfort me, but there was a silence between us that was louder than any words. She was my father's mother and had always lived with us, helping raise me. But now she seemed older, smaller, like grief had folded her in half. Life didn't return to normal. It couldn't. Every corner of the house whispered his name. Every room felt hollow. That's when she came. Her name was Linda. I remember her stepping into our house like a gust of cold wind. She wore heavy makeup, dark lipstick, and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I didn't know what to make of her. Grandma introduced her as a friend of your father's. I watched from the stairs, clutching my favorite stuffed rabbit, as she talked to Grandma over tea. Her voice was sweet, almost too sweet, like syrup hiding something bitter. Linda visited often. She brought chocolates, told me stories, and smiled a lot. Too much. I was just a kid, but something about her made my skin crawl. Still, Grandma said she was nice, so I tried to believe it. 3 months after my father's death, Grandma sat me down in the living room. "Sarah," she began gently, "Linda is going to live with us now. She was very close to your father. She wants to take care of you." I looked up at her, confused. "Why? You take care of me?" She smiled sadly and touched my cheek. "I'm getting older, sweetheart. Linda wants to help. She means well." I nodded, but my stomach turned. I didn't want Linda. I wanted my dad. From that day forward, everything changed. First, Linda pretended to be kind. She would braid my hair, read me fairy tales, and even tuck me into bed. But I noticed something strange. Whenever Grandma wasn't in the room, Linda's smile would vanish. One evening, I accidentally spilled orange juice on the kitchen floor. Linda's eyes flashed like fire. She grabbed my wrist so tightly I gasped, and she leaned close to whisper, "You stupid girl. Do that again, and I'll make sure you regret it." Then just like that, she smiled and called out to Grandma, "Oh, Sarah's just a little clumsy, bless her heart." I was frozen. I didn't understand how someone could wear 2 faces so easily. Grandma didn't notice. She thought Linda was doing her best to help raise me. And in front of her, Linda played the perfect stepmother. But behind closed doors, a different story unfolded. I began to shrink into myself. I no longer laughed or played outside. I tiptoed around the house like a ghost, trying not to draw attention. Linda became colder, crueler. She'd yank my hair when I took too long to get ready. She made me scrub the floors, wash the dishes, and clean her shoes while calling me useless and filthy. If I cried, she'd whisper threats. "One word to your grandma and I'll make sure she disappears too." I was terrified. I didn't want anything to happen to Grandma, so I stayed silent. And every night, I'd press my face into my pillow and cry, asking my father why he left me. I missed his voice, his hugs, his protection. I missed the sound of him singing off-key in the mornings, and the way he always made my oatmeal too sweet but pretended it was perfect. Linda started locking me in the attic if I disobeyed. Once, she left me there for 2 whole nights with nothing but a bottle of water and a slice of stale bread. It was cold, dark, and filled with cobwebs. I remember curling into a corner, hugging my knees, whispering stories to myself just to stay sane. I began to lose weight. My schoolwork suffered. I stopped smiling altogether. At school, teachers noticed I had bruises on my arms, but I always made excuses. I fell, or I bumped into a door. Linda trained me to lie. One day a teacher asked me, "Are you okay at home, Sarah?" I opened my mouth ready to say something. Anything. But I saw Linda waiting outside the classroom window smiling. And I stayed silent. The attic became my second bedroom. A room of dust, cobwebs, and forgotten boxes that smelled of mold and sadness. Every time Linda sent me there, I felt like a piece of my soul stayed behind even after I was allowed out. By the time I was 8, I had learned how to survive in silence. I stopped crying. I stopped asking questions. I stopped telling stories at school. And I stopped drawing rainbows and happy families in my notebooks. Instead, I began watching carefully, quietly, like a mouse in a house full of traps. Linda was different in every room of the house. In the kitchen with Grandma, she was an angel full of smiles and compliments. She'd help cook, laugh at Grandma's stories, and even massage her shoulders when she was tired. But the moment Grandma left the room, her eyes would go dark, and her voice would turn to ice. "I should have sent you to an orphanage," she hissed one morning as she ripped the toast from my plate. "You're nothing but a burden. Just like your mother probably was." I flinched. I never knew my mother, but hearing her insulted by the woman wearing my father's old robe made something twist in my chest. I wanted to scream, to break every plate in the kitchen, to grab the phone and call for help. But I just stood there, silent, swallowing my hurt like poison. One night, after Grandma had gone to bed, Linda came into my room holding a bucket of icy water. I was half asleep when the freezing splash hit me. I jolted up, shivering, drenched. "You forgot to take out the trash," she snapped. "I'm sorry," I stammered, teeth chattering. "Sorry doesn't clean the mess, does it?" she sneered. "Get up, now, and clean the kitchen, with a toothbrush." It was almost midnight. I scrubbed the floor on my knees with an old toothbrush as Linda leaned against the wall, arms folded, watching me with satisfaction. Her shadow loomed large on the tiled walls like a demon come to life. The next morning, I woke up late for school. Grandma asked why I looked so pale. I told her I had a nightmare. That was the only part that wasn't a lie. Linda never raised her voice around Grandma. She didn't have to. Her punishments were private, precise, and always perfectly timed when Grandma was either sleeping, out shopping, or in the garden with her headphones on listening to old music. She made sure no one ever saw the marks, on my back, behind my thighs, or the bruises she'd press into my upper arms when she shook me like a rag doll. One afternoon, after I spilled a glass of milk, she made me kneel on uncooked rice for an hour with my arms in the air. My knees bled. I still have the scars. At school I was quiet. Too quiet. My teachers started sending notes home about my behavior. How I no longer participated in class, how I looked tired, how my grades were slipping. Linda would read the notes aloud, mock me, then tear them up in front of my face. "You want pity?" she'd snarl. "Try harder. Or don't bother showing up again." Sometimes she would starve me as punishment.
No breakfast. No lunch.
If I was lucky, stale bread for dinner. I became frail. My cheeks hollowed. My uniform hung off me like it belonged to someone else. But I learned something terrifying: how to disappear. If I didn't make noise, she wouldn't notice me. If I did my chores before she asked, she might not hit me. If I stayed invisible, I might survive. Despite everything, I clung to Grandma like a raft in a storm. She was the only light left in my world. Her hugs were soft, her voice gentle. She'd braid my hair in the mornings, pack me little notes in my lunchbox, things like, "Remember, you're stronger than you think. Your father is proud of you. I love you forever, my sweet girl." I'd read them in the school bathroom stall and cry silently, gripping them like lifelines. I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to scream, "Grandma, she's hurting me." But fear kept my lips sealed. Linda had threatened me so many times. "If you tell her," she'd whisper, "she'll get sick. She's old. She could have a heart attack. It'll be your fault." She poisoned my mind with fear. And I believed her. I remember one particularly cold winter night. The wind howled outside like wolves circling the house. Grandma had gone to visit her sister in the next town. Linda and I were alone. I had a cough, just a small one. But Linda didn't like the sound of it. "You're going to make me sick," she spat. "Sleep in the shed." I thought she was joking. She wasn't. She dragged me by the wrist barefoot, out to the wooden shed in the backyard and locked me in. There were no lights. Just broken tools, spiderwebs, and the freezing cold. I curled up under a tarp and cried myself to sleep, the wind seeping into my bones. I could hear her laughing through the walls. The next morning Grandma found me out there. I was shaking, my lips blue, my fingers numb. She screamed for Linda, but Linda had her excuses ready. She must have snuck out in the night. I was sleeping. Grandma wrapped me in blankets, made me soup, and rubbed my arms for hours. I wanted to scream the truth in that moment. But Linda stood in the kitchen doorway, silently watching, her eyes burning into me like fire. That night, she pressed a butter knife to my cheek while Grandma was asleep. "If you ever open your mouth again," she whispered, "next time it won't be the shed. It'll be a grave." I nodded, trembling. I was only 9. Sometimes I asked God quietly in my prayers, "If you're real, why do you let her do this?" And sometimes in the dark of the attic, I'd imagine my father opening the door and scooping me up into his arms, whispering, "I'm sorry I left, baby girl. I'm here now." But dreams don't protect you from monsters. A few weeks later, Linda did something worse than anything before. She accused me of stealing money from her purse. It wasn't true. I'd never even touched her things. But she didn't care. She dragged me into the living room, slapped me across the face so hard I saw stars, then made me stand in the corner for hours without dinner again. I fainted. When I woke up, I was on the floor, head throbbing. I'd hit my head on the table corner. Linda was on the phone with someone, crying fake tears, saying, "She's so troubled, I don't know what to do." And just like that, she made herself the victim. I was the troubled child. The liar. The problem. I didn't know how much longer I could survive. But what I didn't know was, someone had started watching. And that someone was Grandma. I lost count of the number of nights I cried myself to sleep. Sometimes in the attic, sometimes in my bed, sometimes even while standing in the corner, because Linda didn't always allow me to lie down. She said sleep was a privilege, and I didn't deserve it. But what hurt even more than the bruises, the beatings, or the starvation, was how invisible I had become. To the world, I was just a quiet, odd little girl who always looked tired and never raised her hand in class. To Grandma, I was a bit withdrawn, but she assumed it was grief. She thought I was still mourning my father. In truth, I was mourning myself. Linda had stolen my childhood piece by piece. One day at school, I passed out during gym class. The nurse said I was dehydrated and malnourished. I remember her looking me up and down, confused and concerned. "Are you eating properly at home, Sarah?" I nodded. She looked at my wrists, bony, bruised, and small. She sighed, then handed me a juice box and said, "I'm calling your guardian." I panicked. "Please, not Linda." I saw her eyebrows twitch just for a second. "Would you rather we call your grandmother?" I nodded desperately. And for the first time in years, someone noticed. Someone saw through the silence. That night, Grandma came to my room, holding the school's incident report in her hands. Her face was pale. Her eyes, usually soft and kind, were stormy with confusion and pain. "Sarah," she said quietly, "why didn't you tell me you fainted?" I looked down. It was nothing. "Are you eating enough?" I hesitated. Linda was listening from the hallway. I could feel it, like a snake coiled in the shadows. So I lied again. "Yes, I just forgot to drink water." Grandma didn't press. She tucked me into bed and kissed my forehead. But the next morning I noticed something strange. She stayed home from her usual errands. And for the first time in a long time she started watching. A few days later, Linda made me scrub the bathroom tiles for 4 hours. My knees were raw and my fingers bled. When Grandma walked by, she paused. "What's going on here?" she asked. Linda smiled. "Sarah's helping out with chores. She said she wanted to surprise you." I looked up. Linda's eyes drilled into mine. Asterisk, asterisk, say it, asterisk, asterisk, they said. Lie. Smile. Obey. Asterisk asterisk. So I did. Yes. I just wanted to help. Grandma nodded, but something had changed in her expression. She didn't believe it. Not fully. I held on to that look like a lifeline. Then came the worst night of all. Linda had gone through my school bag and found a small drawing I'd made. It was a sketch of a girl in a cage with shadows outside the bars. She stormed into my room waving the paper. "What is this?" she screamed. "It's just a drawing. Who are the shadows? Are you telling people things?"
No, no, Isua.
She slapped me. Hard. So hard my ears rang. Then she dragged me by the hair down the hallway, past Grandma's closed door, and into the kitchen. She grabbed a pot of boiling water off the stove and tilted it toward me. "You want to tell stories? Want people to feel sorry for you? You haven't even felt real pain yet." My heart stopped. She didn't pour it. But the threat was enough. She leaned close and whispered, "You're going to ruin your own life, Sarah. And when you do, don't blame me." I was shaking. My vision blurred. My knees buckled beneath me. That night I felt something inside me break. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was numb. The next morning, Grandma told me she was taking me to town for groceries. Linda tried to protest, but Grandma's voice was firm. "She needs fresh air. She's been cooped up for too long." In the car I didn't speak. I just stared out the window, afraid Linda had followed us. But when Grandma pulled the car into a small park and turned off the engine, she said quietly, "Sarah, look at me." I hesitated. She turned toward me and held my hand. "Sweetheart, I know something's wrong." Tears welled up in my eyes instantly. "You don't smile anymore. You flinch when someone touches you. You don't eat much and you barely speak. What's happening?" I bit my lip. "I want to help you," she said, voice shaking. "But I can't if you don't tell me the truth." I finally looked her in the eyes. And for the first time in years, I whispered it. "She hurts me, Grandma." The floodgates opened. I told her everything. Every punishment, every threat, every slap, every night in the attic or shed. The rice, the toothbrush, the lies, the fear, the loneliness, the boiling water. Grandma listened in silence. Her face went from disbelief to horror to fury. By the time I finished, she was crying. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she asked. "Because she said it would kill you," I sobbed. "She said if I told you, you'd die." Grandma hugged me so tightly I could hardly breathe. "Oh, baby. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I should have seen it." We didn't go to the grocery store that day. We went straight to the police station. Grandma gave a statement. I spoke to a kind female officer who let me draw pictures instead of using words. A doctor examined me and documented my injuries. They took photos of the bruises and the scars. I was scared the whole time. I thought Linda would show up, drag me away, scream that I was lying. But she never came. By the time we got home, police officers were already there, waiting with Grandma's permission. They arrested Linda in the driveway. I watched from the car window as she screamed and kicked, her mask finally broken. She went to jail. Not for long, but long enough. I never saw her again. The house felt different without her. The shadows lifted. The silence softened. Grandma became my guardian legally. She started sleeping in my room for a while so I wouldn't feel scared. We painted the attic and turned it into a reading nook. She let me pick new curtains and bedding for my room, bright, cheerful colors. I started therapy. It was hard. But slowly I learned that none of it was my fault. Not the abuse. Not the silence. Not my father's death. I was just a child. A child who survived. But healing isn't a straight road. There were nights I still had nightmares. Days when I flinched at sudden movements. Moments when I doubted my worth. But Grandma reminded me every single day that I was brave. That I was strong. That I was loved. She became my whole world. And I promised myself, no matter how broken I felt, I would never let darkness win again. The night after Linda was arrested, our house was completely silent. But for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel dangerous. There were no heavy footsteps in the hallway. No cruel whispers in the dark. No threats hiding behind fake smiles. Just me, Grandma, and the ticking of the old clock in the living room. I slept in her bed that night, curled against her like a child who had finally returned home after being lost in the forest. I woke up once in the middle of the night, out of habit, expecting Linda's voice to haunt me. But instead I heard Grandma softly snoring, her hand still holding mine. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding for years. For the first time in so long I felt safe. The days that followed were hard but different. The police officers returned to speak with Grandma again, and a social worker came to the house to check on me. She brought coloring books and soft eyes, and she asked gentle questions like, "How do you feel today? And what makes you smile now?" At first, I didn't know how to answer. What made me smile? I had to remember how to smile at all. But slowly, piece by piece, I started to rebuild. Grandma made it her mission to fill our home with light again. She let me pick out new clothes, bake cookies with her, plant flowers in the garden, the very same garden where I used to chase butterflies with my father. The flowers bloomed brighter than ever that spring. At school, the teachers started treating me differently, but not in a bad way. They were kinder, more patient. My favorite teacher, Miss Helen, pulled me aside one afternoon and said, "I'm proud of you, Sarah. You're very brave." I didn't feel brave. I still had nightmares. I still jumped when doors slammed. I still heard Linda's voice sometimes when I was alone. But I nodded and whispered, "Thank you." Because I knew I was trying. Trying was enough for now. Grandma became my official guardian 2 months after Linda's arrest. There was a court hearing. I didn't have to attend, but Grandma did. She stood in front of the judge and told them everything. What I had told her, what she had seen, and how she had failed to see it sooner. Her voice cracked when she said, "I should have protected her. She's all I have left." The judge listened carefully, and then he granted full custody of me to Grandma, permanently. Linda was sentenced to prison for child endangerment, abuse, and neglect. Her sentence wasn't long, just a few years. But it didn't matter to me. What mattered was that she was gone. She could never hurt me again. Grandma and I celebrated quietly that evening. She made my favorite dinner, spaghetti with extra cheese, and we watched old cartoons on her little TV. I sat on her lap like I used to when I was 5. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. Sometimes love is loud. But sometimes, love is just sitting side by side knowing you're safe. A few weeks later, I found something I hadn't seen in years. An old photo album. It was tucked away at the bottom of a drawer in the living room, covered in dust. When I opened it, memories came flooding back. Pictures of me and Dad at the zoo. Me riding on his shoulders. Me asleep in his arms. Grandma laughing beside us, her face full of joy. A life that once felt like a dream. I turned the pages slowly, and my heart ached with longing. "I miss him," I whispered, tears falling onto the plastic sheets. Grandma sat beside me, pulling the album into her lap. She wrapped her arm around me and said, "I miss him every day." We sat there for hours flipping through photos, telling stories about my father. Stories I'd forgotten. Stories I never knew. Stories that made me laugh and cry at the same time. It was like he came back to life for a little while, sitting there with us in spirit. And then Grandma did something that changed my life again. She looked at me and said, "Sarah, would you like to change your last name?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, do you want to take my last name? Make it official?" I stared at her, my heart pounding. All this time, I had been Sarah Johnson, my father's name. But Linda had twisted that name. She'd made me feel like I didn't belong to anyone anymore. But now, here was Grandma, offering me a new name. A new beginning. I nodded slowly, then faster. "Yes, I want to." She smiled through tears. "Then let's make it happen." 2 months later, I became Sarah Miller. My grandmother's name. My name. A name no one could take away from me again. It felt like shedding a skin. Letting go of all the pain and stepping into something stronger, something safer. Healing wasn't fast. Some days I still felt broken. Some days I heard Linda's voice in the back of my mind, telling me I was worthless. But on those days, Grandma would sit with me. She'd hold my hand, and she'd remind me, "You are not what she did to you. You are not the pain you carry. You are the girl who survived. You are the girl who is still here." Eventually, I began to speak openly. I shared my story with trusted teachers, counselors, and even a small support group for children who had experienced abuse. Each time I told it, it hurt a little less. Each time I felt a little lighter. Years passed, and the girl who once cried in attics and slept in sheds became someone new. I grew taller, stronger, louder. I started writing poems, short stories, even a journal. Words became my therapy, my way of taking power back. And every year, on the anniversary of the day Linda was arrested, Grandma and I would go out to eat and celebrate what we called Freedom Day. Not because we wanted to relive the pain, but because we wanted to honor the strength it took to overcome it. One day when I was 15, I asked Grandma why she didn't see the signs sooner. She looked down, her eyes full of sadness. Because I trusted too easily, and I thought love meant always giving someone a chance. But now I know. Love also means protecting the ones who can't protect themselves. I hugged her tightly and said, "You did protect me. You saved me. You gave me everything." She whispered, "And I always will." Years passed like pages turning in a book. I never thought I'd live long enough to finish. But I was still here. Still standing. Still healing. And I owe that to one person, my grandmother. The woman who became my home when the world tried to bury me. I was 16 when I stood in front of my English class and shared my story for the first time. Out loud without crying. It was part of a school project. Tell a story that shaped your life. My hands shook. My voice cracked. But I didn't stop. I told them about my father, about the love we shared, about the day he didn't come home. I told them about Linda, the monster behind the smile, about the attic, the shed, the whispers, the bruises. And then I told them about Grandma, about the moment she finally saw me, really saw me, and how she never looked away again. The class was silent. My teacher had tears in her eyes. When I finished, something shifted. It was as if a weight had finally rolled off my chest. Like I'd opened a window that had been locked for years, and through it came fresh air. Hope. That day marked a turning point. I started volunteering at a youth shelter for girls who had suffered abuse. I met others with stories like mine. Some worse, some different, but all carrying invisible scars. We talked. We listened. We cried. And together we healed. Grandma stood by me every step of the way. She drove me to therapy sessions, waited outside in her car reading romance novels. She never asked too many questions, never forced me to explain when I wasn't ready. She just loved me with patience, with gentleness, with quiet strength. She taught me how to cook without fear, how to laugh without guilt, how to exist without apology. She reminded me every single day that I was not what happened to me. I was what I chose to become afterward. On my 18th birthday, Grandma handed me a small box. Inside was a necklace, a delicate silver chain with a tiny butterfly pendant. "It was your mother's," she said softly. "Your dad gave it to her when you were born. He called you his little butterfly." I held it in my hand, tears spilling down my cheeks. "I think it's time you wore it," she whispered. "You've earned your wings." I hugged her tighter than ever before. "I love you, Grandma. More than anything." She kissed my forehead. "And I love you, Sarah. You are my light." After graduating high school, I applied for college with a personal essay titled Asterisk. I lived in the attic, but I wasn't a ghost. Asterisk. It was raw, honest, painful, and it got me a full scholarship. I cried when I opened the acceptance letter. Not just because I was going to college, but because I had done it. I had broken the chain. I had carved a path forward through fire and fear. And I wasn't walking alone. Grandma was right there beside me. Before I left for college, I visited my father's grave. I hadn't gone in a long time. It had hurt too much before. But this time I brought flowers. Daisies, his favorite. I sat beside the stone for hours talking to him like he was still there. "I wish you could see me now," I whispered. "I wish you could meet the person I became. I hope you're proud." The wind rustled the trees. And in that moment I swear I felt his warmth. Like he was saying, "I always was." College was a new world. First I was afraid I wouldn't fit in. That people would look at me and only see the girl with the haunted past. But they didn't. They saw a girl who wrote with passion, who volunteered on weekends, who carried herself with quiet confidence. I majored in psychology. I wanted to understand what makes people hurt others. And more importantly, what helps people heal. In my second year, I published a short story based on my life. It went viral. Hundreds of messages poured in from strangers, some survivors, some supporters, all saying the same thing. Thank you. I thought I was alone. And I realized, my pain had a purpose. My story wasn't just mine anymore. It was a lifeline for others still living in silence. Back home, Grandma had grown older but never weaker. She still called me every night. Still sent me care packages with way too many cookies. Still reminded me to take breaks and drink water and stop worrying so much. She became my anchor, my rock, my everything. One summer when I returned home during break, we sat under the stars in the backyard. The same backyard where I once feared the shed. Now it held fairy lights and a garden swing. I leaned against her shoulder. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you didn't take me to the park that day? I asked. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I think about it every day. And I thank God I did. Because I might have lost you if I waited one more week. One more night. I took her hand. You saved me. No, she replied gently. You saved yourself. I just opened the door. A few years later, Grandma passed away in her sleep. It was peaceful, quiet, like her. I was 23. Losing her felt like losing a limb, but it didn't feel like the end, because she had given me so much of herself that she still lived in me. In every kind word I spoke, in every child I helped, in every story I told. Today I'm 28 years old. I run a nonprofit for abused children. We provide safe housing, therapy, and legal support for survivors. We help them reclaim their voices just like I did. I still wear my mother's butterfly necklace. And in my office I keep a photo of Grandma holding me when I was 7, before everything went dark. That photo reminds me who I fight for. If you're watching this and you're in pain, I want you to hear me ****. You are not alone. You are not weak for being hurt. You are strong for surviving. And you are worthy of love, safety, and peace. Tell someone. Ask for help. Don't wait until it's too late. There are people like my grandma out there, people who will open the door and let the light back in. All you have to do is knock.